Hey, welcome to another video. So today we're going to be going into the culture and sword logic of the Hive. But before we begin, please be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, join the Sith Citadel Discord, links in the description, and consider becoming a join member or sending a super thanks if you wish to further support the channel. Otherwise, let's jump straight into it. So the Hive have a complex religious system based around profane rituals and the worship of a pantheon of ascendant Hive gods, in the style of an absolute monarchy. These Hive gods exist in the Ascendant realm, described as a higher plane of misery, associated with the darkness, known to the Hive as the Deep. Locked outside of physical reality, not unlike the Vex realms locked out of time. Dwelling within are Sith universes, known as throne worlds of their own creation. Each world houses its respective god's oversoul, which protects them from permanent death should their corporeal bodies be destroyed. The Hive Prince Crota is introduced as one of the youngest Hive deities. Known as the God Knight and the Hope Eater, he and his broods precede the coming of Oryx, when they invade the worlds touched by the Traveler and its light. Oryx is Crota's father, and the central figure of their religion as well as the God King of the Hive. Through his shrines, he maintains contact with his force spread across the universe. Other deities include Oryx's own sisters, Savathun and Zivo-Arath, and the greater worm gods Ir, and Zol, and Yol. Like Crota and Oryx, they have disciples named after them. A fifth god named Akka is recorded in the Books of Sorrow, and it is from his remains that the Dreadnought is built. All of Oryx's broods hold a special holiday called Aversion Day, which celebrates the creation of the Taken King's Dreadnought by turning things inside out the same way Oryx merged his throne world with his ship. The Hive use a unique writing system, based on runes and glyphs, which they describe as a viral language. Hive runes draw their power from a different dimension, where there's no difference between a word and its meaning. According to Ikora, the Hive runes are not letters, but rather logograms, representing a word or idea etched into them. Their patterns draw power from their meaning, and their orientation casts a spell. When the Hive erode the barrier between our dimension and theirs, the rune for death brings literal death. They also employ it for their forbidden Hive rituals, including the use of shadow rifts and the weapons of sorrow. The same glyphs are also found on ceilings used to lock doors and contain their monsters. The Hive have a great hatred for the light, and to them, the eternal struggle between light and dark is not only a war, it is a crusade. All light must be devoured so darkness can reclaim the universe. They have even attempted to attack the Traveler directly, though a ritual in which they drained its light through a fragment they captured in the Chamber of Night. The sword logic acts as a philosophy and a metaphysical system, through which they may gain paracausal powers. It is the antithesis to the prophecy of the light, but more specifically Marasov's bomb logic, which emphasizes complexity and cooperation rather than simplicity and self-interest. The central tenet of the sword logic is that existence, the struggle to exist, and that any entity, whether a life form or a fundamental aspect of nature, which cannot protect itself against defeat, should be rightfully destroyed by a more powerful entity. In the context of intelligent beings, the logic promotes as its ultimate goal the establishment of a systematic, self-proving civilizational structure, which can survive until the end of time, and possibly beyond. An end state often referred to as the last true shape. In following the principles of the sword logic, a being not only demonstrates their ability to survive in the face of existential challenges, but also acquires paracausal power through the darkness. This is known as becoming sharp. The ultimate expression of this power is the ability to access the Ascendant realm, which allows one to create a throne world and thus survive death in the real universe. All power derived from the sword logic must be taken by force, not received as a gift, else it be rendered weak and untrue. The sword logic is the foundation of the entire Hive civilization and its hierarchy. Every Hive must prove itself to become greater, or risk annihilation. This holds true for every Hive, from the tiny thrall to the ascendant Hive god kings, including Oryx and his sisters. Even the worm gods are not exempt, as evidenced by Oryx slaying Akka to gain an audience with the darkness itself. As a byproduct of the pact made with the worm gods, when a Hive grows stronger from the killing of lesser life forms, and those which follow the dictates of the light and darkness, so does its internal worm's lust for killing, meaning that unless it is fed enough, the worm will eventually consume its host. The Leviathan knew of the sword logic, and claimed that it led to ruin for all who followed its path. In contrast, the darkness and Toland claimed that it is a beautiful thing, majestic and noble, and that all life should abide by it as the self-proving reason for existing. However, it unsurprisingly has a corrosive effect on the psyche of the practitioner, eventually rendering them into an entirely different creature that would horrify themselves if they could view it objectively. For example, after untold millennia of practicing the sword logic, the emotions of love and hate gradually became indistinguishable to the Hive, and the same may have happened to joy and sorrow. Even Savathun, who convinced Oryx originally to find the worms, expresses doubt as to the validity of their crusade. It is also known that the Winover, which may or may not be the darkness itself, seems to endorse the sword logic as being very much in line with its philosophy and goals. Although the sword logic is treated by the Hive as a central commandment to the darkness, a somewhat cryptic logic is the only way to achieve the will of the darkness. So she herself specifically chose the sword logic as the Hive's guiding principle because she knew that it would ensure the Hive's future supremacy. The Witness itself would also refute the sword logic as a childish game that the Hive had been distracted by. The sword logic serves as a methodology to how individual Hive grow in power. In essence, by killing their enemies, the Hive prove that they are stronger than that enemy, and through the sword logic, gain that strength in reality. When Oryx killed Xivu Arath in his throne world, he proved that he was mightier than her. When Oryx killed Savathun there, he proved that he was more cunning than her. Having proved that he was stronger than both, Oryx demonstrated logically that he was strong enough to take on the worm god Akka, and by killing Akka, Oryx proved he was strong enough to commune with the darkness directly, as the worms did. Repeated application of the sword logic causes the wielder to gradually become self-defining and sharp, both no longer bound by physical laws, incapable of outright violating them at will. It is existence asserted by violence. Both the Hive and the worm gods, for example, achieve faster than light travel by using their sharpness to cut wounds in space, which they pass through. Due to paracausal entities becoming beyond the normal laws of physics, they are impossible for the Vex's otherwise perfect simulations to model. Resurrection in general is seen as heretical by the Hive who follow the sword logic. To the Hive, death is necessary to attaining apotheosis, as one can only grow stronger after defeating an opponent. If the slain were to be resurrected, it would nullify the power obtained through vanquishing them. However, it should be noted that the rules of death are somewhat different to the Hive than what they are to humans. This is most notably exemplified by the concept of ascendants. Those Hive individuals who have grown powerful enough through the sword logic can move between the physical dimension and the ascendant plane, and carve out a throne world there. So that they are killed in the real world, they may retreat to their throne world and return after a time. Only a death that occurs in one's own throne world is a true final death in terms of the Hive. It appears that dying in another's throne world is reversible, as illustrated in the Books of Sorrow, where Oryx resurrects his sisters, having killed them both within his throne world. It is likely this was possible because the sisters had already established their own throne worlds. Furthermore, the manner in which Oryx brings his sisters back is very particular. He does it by defining their nature through acts of war and cunning. At another point, Xivu Arath calls him back to the deep, where she and Savathun have trapped him in a similar manner. And though describing him, and millennia later, Savathun summons Xivu Arath to Tabadal through an act of war and blood. Another example of Hive dying in another's throne world and then coming back is Yet, the Death Singer, being one of the bosses of the raid Crota's End. She dies in his throne world, but can later be seen attending Crota's ritual by passing in the mission Last Rites. Crota's maid Omnigul is also notable for returning after having been killed by the Guardians, but it can be a hint towards her being an ascendant Hive. All those instances are not truly resurrection in terms of the Hive, thereby not being contradictory to the sword logic. Accepting power bestowed by more powerful beings is also a violation of the logic. To obtain power, one must take it by force. As such, Nokris, who learned the secrets of necromancy from Zol, was branded a heretic, exiled from his kind, and condemned to obscurity as his father removed nearly all traces of his name. A potentially ruinous oversight of the tithing system set up by Oryx directly disobeys the sword logic. As stated in his dialogue with Akka, the Worm of Secrets, to have something be given instead of taken by force violates the core pillars of the deep. Seeing as the desolation wrought by the lesser hive warriors is willingly given to those who are higher in the hierarchy, the method used to prevent their worms from consuming them may actually directly oppose the philosophy on which their civilization has been founded. After the deaths of Oryx and Crota at the hands of light-bearing guardians, more Hive had chosen to go against the sword logic for the sake of survival. Turning to the ritualistic taboos of necromancy like Nokris, before and even forming their own tithing system like Savathun, who created the concept of Imbaru as an alternative means to gain tribute through acts of cunning and deception. Even the surviving daughters of Crota committed their own heresy by remaking Zolmak, the instrument of torment, into a hive abomination, infused with the essence of nightmares. With the arrival of the pyramids, Eris Morn surmised the hive committed more empowered or self-destructive sorcery out of desperation in a future arms race for the witness and its gifts. Despite being seen as a heretical sect, the Hive of the Lucent Brood still conduct the sword logic, even if they had become blessed by the Traveler's Light. In one of these instances, a knight battled a light-bearer wizard, in which both would continually kill each other, invoking existence as worthiness. That which cannot defend itself must die. And this is the one true shape, Ayat, restating the sword logic's first tenet. The witness viewed the sword logic as a childish game, born of a misunderstanding of its own philosophy, and its vision of the final shape being more all-encompassing than that envisioned by the Hive. Whereas the Hive believed that only one entity will ultimately become the final shape, after having destroyed everything else in the universe. The witness sought a final shape in which all living beings would be incorporated into a perfected, eternal, calcified version of reality. It nonetheless acknowledged that the sword logic is useful in motivating and empowering the Hive as they carried out its will throughout the cosmos. As revealed by Asha, the Deputy Commander Sloan, the worm gods originated as members of the proto-worm species that lived on the planet Fundament, who became corrupted by the witness's philosophy, and then began slaughtering one another in order to achieve ascendancy through the sword logic. The Vex first learned of the sword logic when Crota accidentally cut open a portal into one of their sealed dimensions. At first they were confused. Their models and projections clashed horribly with the physics of Oryx's throne world. In response, they manifested Kira, Blade Transform, who quickly deduced the source of the Hive's power and organized a series of test invasions in a plan to bootstrap itself to godhood according to the Hive's own rules. Cabal Emperor Callus knew of the story of Oryx and his species through a device called the Oxa machine, and of their fall to the worm gods. Though he loathes the Hive as simple pretenders and their sword logic as an excuse to escape the inevitability of death after having spoke with the witness personally. The Martian Cabal legions have little to no experience with the sword logic, having never engaged with the Hive in protracted combat except once on the moon, and knowing that the Hive had weapons or tactics which effectively neutralized Guardian Resurrection. Once the Skyburner's legions set foot upon the Dreadnought, they became beholden to the sword logic, but showed no indication that they recognized any differences to conventional physics. The Baron of the Scorn, known as Hirax the Mindbender, has dedicated himself to understanding and harnessing the sword logic and other Hive secrets. After the death of Cade VI, he has apparently been successful in carving out his own throne world in the Ascendant Plane, and has the ability to sway lesser Hive creatures to follow his whims. In order to defeat Oryx for good, and by extension Crota, though unwittingly, the Guardians tapped into the power of the sword logic, as even Light was forced to obey it within the bounds of his throne world. However, in defiance of the sword logic's edicts, The Guardian did not claim their enemy's power. This infuriated Toland as he saw the raid team which killed Oryx and his court leave without taking his place, leaving his power open to be seized by another, and meaning that all he had worked for was for nothing. The process of creating Taken transforms a victim into more perfect form, closer to the desired end state of obeying the sword logic. As Taken are not known to obey the conventional HIVE hierarchy and tribute system, it may be that their new forms have rendered these systems completely unnecessary. So what did you guys think of the HIVE and their sword logic? Please let me know in the comments down below. If you haven't already, please be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, join the Sith Citadel Discord, links in the description, and consider becoming a join member or sending a super thanks if you wish to further support the channel. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.